Morning.
Good morning, Geoff.
If you are someone that celebrates Halloween, you probably went out and carved a pumpkin this year. And Tracy looked up immediately because he wanted to show a video, you may have seen it on Instagram, of me having way too much fun carving a pumpkin. So my family does that too. In fact, my in-laws made the mistake of giving me a Sawzall for my birthday last year. And so I figured, you gotta use a Sawzall to cut the pumpkin, right? Well, it turns out, making the initial cavity, that's a great idea. But then, making small cuts, it doesn't work out so well, but it was a lot of fun. So you might have done that as well. Hopefully you use the Sawzall too, because that's the way to carve a pumpkin. Man, it goes really fast. But whether you did or whether you didn't, you probably, maybe you know the story behind the pumpkin that you're carving. And I'm not here to do what I grew up listening to today. Let me explain that. So when I grew up, in my church at least, you didn't talk about Halloween, you just kind of, you came to church and you kind of eyeballed each other like, hey, what are you guys doing for Halloween? But you didn't tell, the pastor about it because Halloween's bad. And so you don't want to tell the pastor that you're celebrating Halloween, you want to say, oh yeah, we're going to the harvest party. As something that God created because, And then later on in life, I actually was reflecting on this and, wait, you could only come to the harvest party as something God created. But God created angels. Angels then fell from grace, right, and became demons. Do you see a problem? God also created the musculoskeletal system inside of your body, so you can come as a skeleton. There's so many loopholes you could have found as a kid that weren't good, but I'm glad that I never found them. Anyway, but you might have grown up with the tradition that Halloween is a bad thing. I don't know. I certainly did. But the story behind Halloween and the story behind our modern celebrating of Halloween actually has some funny Christian roots to it, and I want to share that with you today. My message starts in Proverbs. We're actually going to start right over here in Proverbs 3, and the main overarching message, and if you're listening for it in the story, it's there. It's just all over the place in the story. The main overarching message is, if you trust in God, and if God is your home base, your foundation for life, and the things we've been talking about over the past couple weeks with Proverbs, then He's going to show you a path. And it is going to be the correct path to take. So there was a character in Irish folklore and legend, and his name was Stingy Jack. And Stingy Jack was a character that not only, as the name suggests, was horrible with money and wouldn't give money to anybody, but Stingy Jack was also a trickster. And everybody currently living in Ireland, when this became Irish folk legend, they spoke Gaelic as far as we know, and they also were pagans. And what pagans means in this sense isn't the Christian version of pagans that's in the Bible, which is just people that don't believe in God, in a one true God as we know the Hebrew God. But pagans refers to people that worshipped spirits in the woods, spirits of the earth, that kind of thing, and believed that different factors were working in the earth and nature and that kind of stuff. And that is still just, if you read the Brothers Grimm fairy tales, or if you all have seen any Disney movie that reflects a fairy tale, it is everywhere throughout that, the pagan tradition of things existing in the woods, and you can call upon different spirits and magic and that kind of stuff. So, Stingy Jack was a character. Oh, hi, Jack. Stingy Jack was a character that was very trickstery. That's not a word, but he would play tricks on everybody that wasn't going to let him get his way. And he one day went to the devil because, as you might know, actually Christians began to immigrate into the area of these Celts that were celebrating pagan things and everything like that. So you'll kind of see that throughout the story. He goes to the devil. And Stingy Jack goes to the devil and he says to the devil, hey, so I want to make a deal with you. If you can climb to the very top of this tree, if you can indeed do that, then you can have my soul for eternity. But if you get stuck up in the tree, or if you can't climb down from the tree, then you will not be able to take me, and I'll forever be barred from hell. And so the devil, because the devil can climb, I guess, said, sure, and goes ahead and just takes him up on this. The devil, I guess, climbs to the very top of the tree, and Stingy Jack, meanwhile, has assorted about like 15 to 16 crosses. And he stacks them all around the tree because the devil can't go down and touch crosses, evidently. And so the devil's at the top of the tree, sees this at the bottom, and without even coming down, calls down to Stingy Jack and says, Jack, you trickster. I don't have an Irish accent ready for you, I'm sorry. Jack, you trickster. You've eluded me again. I'll grant you your wish. And the devil makes the deal with him. And so Stingy Jack, after, I guess, trusting that the devil would keep his word, collects all the crosses, lets the devil come down, goes about his life. So finally, Jack dies one day, and he goes up to heaven. And, again, Christian theme, heaven. He goes up to heaven, and he gets to the pearly gates of heaven, and he is met by an angel. And the angel says, whoa, hold up here, hold up. Jack, you don't belong here. And Jack goes, why in heaven's name don't I belong in heaven? Because I eluded the devil, he won't let me in. Therefore, the only other place for me is heaven. The angel comes to him and he says, well, you didn't make a deal with the other guy too. You needed to have made a deal with him too. You know what that deal is, we know. Basically, you had to commit your life to Christ, right? And so Stingy Jack is forced to wander the earth because he's no longer welcome in hell. I guess the devil kept his promise. And so Jack, he loved turnips, I guess, and he decides to hollow himself out a turnip and carve a little window in it or a face in it or something like that. And the devil, taking pity on him, which is kind of strange for the devil, tosses him an ember, and Jack puts it inside of the now jack-o'-lantern and begins to swing the jack-o'-lantern around, and he lights his way that way because he is not allowed to go to either place after he dies. And so the people of Ireland began celebrating this tradition, and as far as we know, they began carving out basically everything they could hollow out. So root vegetables, apparently they did it to some beets. I can't see anyone doing that to a beet. I guess that would be really intricate. I'm not very intricate, hence the Sawzall. But, a bunch of Irish immigrants came to the United States eventually, and they noticed that in the United States, this really giant gourd thing grows real well. And they went, whoa, why haven't we been using that last night? And they went over to the pumpkin, and I guess decided to carve out pumpkins, and there you go. Now you have the tradition of the jack-o'-lantern as a big globe. But basically you light it up on what was called All Hallows Eve, because it was something that the pagans as well as the Christians in the area both celebrated. The pagans celebrated it because of their own tradition, and it was kind of a healthy day for them to, I guess, call on the spirits of those that were already dead to guide them and things like that. Well, the Christians show up in Ireland, and all these Celts are around celebrating this kind of stuff, and the Christians look at that and they go, all right, they have this story about a jack. They have this thing they do honoring their dead relatives, basically. What if we came to them, and instead of condemning them and saying, you're horrible, evil people, and you're all gonna burn, instead of doing that, what if we, said, these things are great. Why don't we factor them into our tradition and just say, hey, did you know that your relatives it is good to honor your relatives, especially those that have passed, and remember them? And in fact, if you were to commit your life to the Lord Jesus Christ, you could be saved and you could see everybody forever in heaven. So the Christians decided to basically meld their tradition and in turn celebrate an All Hallows Eve. And so the Irish have this tradition of Jack, and he has Christian themes inside of his story. We don't know what the story was before the Christians showed up, but we now know that on All Hallows Eve, it is an actual Christian celebration, and still is celebrated by a couple of Catholic denominations, a couple of types of Catholics, that you would actually carve out your jack-o'-lantern, and you actually pray for and with your family, and talk about those that have already passed on. Isn't that a great thing? It's funny that Christians have a tradition of doing that, of assimilating other cultures and going, you know what, we're going to blend right in, but so much so that you will see the path laid out before you, and you're going to see that God loves you and has a plan for your life. It's kind of like when Paul went into Rome, and there were so many statues of other gods. I've already told this story at one point, but he comes in and he says, hey, that God doesn't have a name. Do you know about that God? And they went, no. We've been waiting for someone to tell us about that God. And he goes, let me tell you about that God. I know about it. It's kind of funny that Christians have been doing that so long, basically since Christ started the church. I think that's kind of beautiful. But Proverbs kind of echoes this. Our verse today starts this in Proverbs 3. My child, never forget the things I have taught you. Store my commands in your heart. If you do this, you will live many years and your life will be satisfying. Never let loyalty and kindness leave you. Tie them around your neck as a reminder. Write them deep within your heart. Then you will find favor with God and people, and you will earn a good reputation. Seek his will in all you do, and he will show you which path to take. The lesson today is that if you are well rooted, you see what I did there? Because they started with root vegetables. Sorry, I tried that. Yeah, pumpkin's a good word, I know. If you are well rooted in the things of God, then he's going to show you the perfect plan of attack for any situation. And in fact, God shows this kind of to you when a storm hits. It's kind of funny in my own personal life that my prayer life goes kind of like this, kind of systemically around when things hit the fan, you know? When things get bad, all of a sudden, my eyes turn completely to God because I go, you are the fail-safe. And I've kind of, I'm kind of angry at myself about that a few times because God shouldn't be my fail-safe. He should be the only plan there is, right? But if everything's going okay and things look great in my eyes, I love to go, it's okay, God, I've got it from here, right? I love to do that, and that's a terrible thing to do. You never want to neglect God's plan for you, and you never want to neglect the fact that you always need that present relationship with God. But yet, I do it. There's a great story in, I automatically thought of Joshua when I thought of today. And Joshua and the Battle of Jericho still goes on today. Let me explain. You might have heard the song or heard the story, Joshua and the Battle of Jericho, walls came tumbling down, that kind of thing. It's an old gospel hymn, as well as a really great story. But the battle for that area of the world still goes on to this very day. And the battle amongst Christians and the battle amongst philosophers and the battle amongst scientists that have actually studied the region still goes on today. And I bet you didn't know that because I didn't know it until I started studying this. So if you got a Bible and you love flipping pages and things like that, you know exactly where to turn. Go to Joshua 6. Joshua 6 is where I kind of want to skip. Joshua 6. Now, in Joshua 6, Joshua is preparing for an all-out assault on a place called Jericho. Now, my class in 6th grade is actually studying, ironically enough, the cities of Mesopotamia, which are city-states. Now, how we know that a city-state is a city-state is it's too big to be a city and too small to be a state. There you go. That's your cheat sheet. It's kind of like Portland or Seattle. They were kind of about, the bigger ones like Babylon were about the size of that. However, Jericho was smaller, yet fortified. A very fortified city. They knew about sieges. And the reason they knew about sieges is because there was a gang in the area at the time called the Assyrians. And the Assyrians were great at laying siege to your city. And siege, if you don't know, is kind of the art of surrounding a place and basically looking at them for a long time, hoping they run out of food. And so in my class, they loved hearing about that stuff. We did a diagram and everything. But it's kind of funny, I got to talk about Jericho with a bunch of 6th graders in a secular classroom because it's actually something that happened. Or didn't. And that's the thing. That's the fight now. So in Joshua 6, it starts like this. Now the gates of Jericho, sorry, I don't have it up there, I totally forgot. Now the gates of Jericho were securely barred because of the Israelites. No one went out, and no one came in. Then the Lord said to Joshua, see, I have delivered Jericho into your hands along with its king and its fighting men. You must march around the city once with all the armed men. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the seventh day, march around the city 7 times with the priests blowing the trumpets. When you hear them sound a long blast on the trumpets, have the whole army give a loud shout, and then the wall of the city will collapse, and the army will go up, everyone straight in. Interesting. So don't attack the city. Don't wait to starve them out. Surround the city first, wait for orders. As soon as that was done, the next order was, all right, now that you've done that, march around the city. And then just yell, and I'm going to give it to you. But the thing is, you have to follow the plan. You have to do what God told you to do, or it's not going to work out right. It's very symbolic, all the things that God is telling them to do. Now, I kind of looked up the method of how you would lay siege to a place, and really how you would lay siege to a place is there's a lot of pictures that I found of Joshua and the Battle of Jericho, a lot of art that Christians have drawn over the years, and it shows you walking directly under the wall. You don't want to do that. Because a few siege tactics that you would use if you were in a city-state that's been laid siege to, you would boil oil, a lot of oil, and you would have it on top of the wall, so that if anyone at all tries to touch the wall, you would just pour boiling oil all over them. The second thing that you would do is you would actually have a whole bunch of boulders and rocks and things like that up on the parapets, and you would actually wait to push them off when people were walking right next to the wall. So you wouldn't walk next to the wall. This was also kind of the transition to the Bronze Age, so people had some pretty good spears that were meant for throwing a long distance. People had a lot of bows and arrows and things like that, and by all accounts, the people of Jericho would have been very good at using these things. So you want to stay out of arrow shot, and you want to stay out of the way of throwing spears, rocks, oil, what have you. So you really would have not been next to the city at all. You would have been around the city just close enough to where the inhabitants of the city actually would look out and go, oh, there's an army out there and we can't get out. You would then make a complete circle around said city, and you would just wait. Just sit there and wait for them to do something. Now, there are a couple ways to get out of this. The people of Jericho could have decided to breach the gate, run out, and just attack the Israelites. And that's what some of them did. Like, if you saw the fighting force, you could kind of go, all right, there's not as many as we thought, let's go for it. You could actually bust out and take them. Now, the thing that was working for Joshua was the fact that the city of Jericho had been built upon itself so many times that it was literally a city on a hill. So if Joshua, we think, this is kind of what archaeologists think, if Joshua had been a little bit far away enough to where the line of sight disappears over the hill, the people of Jericho inside wouldn't have known what to do. They would have looked out and gone, all right, there's a lot of dudes out there, but we're not sure how many. And they wouldn't have come out. So, setting the scene for you, that's what happens. So Joshua, son of Nun, called the priests and said to them, take up the ark of the covenant of the Lord and have 7 priests carry trumpets in front of it. And he ordered the army, advance, march around the city with an armed guard going ahead of the ark of the Lord. When Joshua had spoken to the people, the 7 priests carrying the 7 trumpets before the Lord went forward, blowing their trumpets, and the ark of the Lord's covenant followed them. The armed guard marched ahead of the priests who blew the trumpets, and the rear guard followed the ark. All this time the trumpets were sounding. But Joshua had commanded the army, do not give a war cry, do not raise your voices, do not say a word until the day I tell you to shout. Then shout. So we had the ark of the Lord carried around the city, circling it once. Then the army returned to camp and spent the night there. And this continues, right? We know the whole story. This continues until finally they do give the shout, and the walls of Jericho fall completely. And the city is given to them. But that's not the end of the story. And I want to skip ahead because that's not the end. As I looked this up, the city of Jericho has been the source of so much debate that Christians are divided over it. Archaeologists decided to go to the site in the 50s and decided to dig the thing up. And they decided to go, okay, they were all, I imagine they were believers because they were using where the Bible kind of said that the city was, and using around the time period the Bible said would have happened. And they began to uncover the city, and they finally realized that, there's no walls that seem to have fallen. So they declared the Bible is wrong. This went on for a few years. Another group of archaeologists come in. And they say, oh, okay, so we dug it up again, and it's a little bit more complicated than that. So the city of Jericho has been built on so many times since that time period that we can't really tell what's fell and what hasn't. But they began to test the soil around, and they found a great amount of burnt something. Like the city had been really burned at one point, probably near the time when Joshua would have led the Israelites that way. And then, so that kind of left a gray area. A third group of archaeologists comes in years later, this is in the 90s, and they begin to excavate the area again, and they say, okay, we finally know what happened. There was no city here at the time that Joshua would have been alive. And the reason we know this is because we did some radiocarbon dating on the site, and we found out that it's way too, these ruins are way too old. The city had been sacked so many times after that, and then no one lived there forever, and then someone tried to build a city on it or something like that. But in the meantime, Joshua he wasn't there. About the same time, about 1997, someone decided to send something to be radiocarbon dated, just for kicks and giggles. It was a bologna sandwich. And the bologna sandwich registered as being 2,500 years old. The bologna sandwich was only about a week old when it was sent to be radiocarbon dated. Soon after this time, just coincidence, right? Has nothing to do with the sandwich. Archaeologists recently again returned to Jericho and went, okay, we can't use radiocarbon dating for some reason. We should dig it up again and find out what. Basically, scientists have been doing this so many times, and basically the only thing they've come up with is the fact that the city's been run over and rebuilt roughly 55 times since Joshua was around. And no one can really, everybody kind of disputes at this point Joshua's story that the Battle of Jericho actually took place and whatnot. But I want to kind of skip ahead in the story because you could take that today and you could be like, oh man, the Bible didn't prove itself, when it actually did. Right before Joshua 7, it says this. They burned the entire city and everything in it. This is verse 24. They burned the entire city. The archaeologists found burned things all over. They weren't sure when the city had been burned because no one at the time has a record of burning the city, including the Egyptians who kept perfect records. Later it says this, around 26. At that time Joshua pronounced this solemn oath. Cursed before the Lord is the man who undertakes to rebuild this city Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn son he will lay its foundations. At the cost of his youngest he will set up its gates. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his fame spread throughout the land. Basically, he curses this city in the name of the Lord and says, nothing will stand on this spot ever again. You try and build it again, it will be run over. And these are the two things that the archaeologists found. The Bible is true. Now, it's kind of funny. The 50 years or so that this was being excavated and dug up and that kind of thing, Christians were in an uproar. They didn't know what to do. It's as if they started disbelieving their own Bible and going, well, maybe it's like a metaphor. Maybe Joshua didn't do anything. Maybe there was no Joshua. Maybe it's just a story to tell us something, and they were scrambling. They didn't know what to do. What they really needed to do was to trust God's path. The Bible is many documents. It's poetry. It's love songs. In the Song of Solomon, it gets real awkward. You should read that sometime. It's apocalyptic stuff in the book of Revelation. It's a story about how a perfect God sent his perfect son to die a perfect death for a bunch of imperfect people that needed him so badly. And it's also history. And every time people try and disprove the history of the Bible, it always turns up false. They can't do anything about it. It always turns out the Bible is always correct. In fact, it actually points specifically to dates, specifically to places, and every time someone goes, oh yeah, that place didn't exist, that's more of like a metaphor, to describe something in the Bible, it always is disproved, and the Bible is always proved correct, and this is no different. We must trust the plan God's laid out before us, folks. I find that kind of cool. The last thing it says in Proverbs, in the part we're going to cover today, it's kind of two parts in Proverbs, is this. Don't be impressed with your own wisdom. Instead, fear the Lord and turn away from evil. Then you will have healing for your body and strength for your bones. I'll read that again. Don't be wise in your own eyes. This is a different version, sorry, the one I have on the screen. Fear the Lord and shun evil. This will bring health to your body and nourishment to your bones. So, my question today is, where's your home base? Are you like me and your relationship with God kind of goes in circles? It kind of changes whether there's a problem or not. If so, it's not a bad thing that God turns you back to Him. And it's kind of funny that problems in my life kept being more and more intense until finally my prayer life got a little better. And then now it's kind of like when something else comes along, I go, well, I know where to turn because I've been there all along now. I encourage you to take that challenge. If you've got a prayer time and a prayer place for God, I keep harping on this, I'm sorry. If you've got a prayer time and a prayer place that you just connect with God on a daily basis, enhance that. Find yourself a study. That's what I did. But don't neglect the meeting of you and God throughout your day and throughout your life. And if you kind of go in the seasons of life and that kind of thing, I encourage you to do that. Because the fear of God and the preparation of just being in a close relationship with the Savior will just enhance your life in so many ways. And in fact, there will all of a sudden be a path laid out before you. God will give you guidelines. He'll give you things to do, and He will give you tasks. And when you see it, it's kind of hard to, as they say, unsee it. When you see it, you kind of go, wow, I didn't know that God would do this, but all of a sudden there'll be a prompt. It'll be something, and you have a task to complete. Let's pray. God, I ask for your provision over our lives, God. Would you bless those that are here? I pray that everyone would have an amazing relationship with you, God. But if there's anyone in here that's kind of, their life with you and their relationship with you kind of goes in cycles, God, would you help them to further establish that friendship with you, God?